The black SUVs surrounded her garage at exactly 3:47 p.m. "We know who you are, Samantha," the agent said. She rolled up her sleeve, revealing the tattoo she'd hidden for 5 years. "Then you know I've been waiting for this conversation." Meet Samantha Ghost Brooks, 32 years old, blonde hair usually tied back in a messy ponytail, calloused hands that could rebuild an engine or end a life with equal precision. For 5 years, she had operated Brooks Auto Repair in the small town of Pine Ridge, Colorado, population 2,847. To everyone who knew her, she was just another skilled mechanic who had moved to town after some trouble in the city. They had no idea that Samantha Brooks was one of the most lethal operatives in U.S. military history. The garage sat on the edge of town, a converted barn surrounded by acres of empty land that provided excellent sight lines in all directions. Samantha had chosen the location carefully, though her neighbors assumed she simply preferred privacy. The building itself looked ordinary: rusted metal siding, hand-painted signs advertising brake repair and oil changes, a gravel parking lot filled with pickup trucks and farm equipment. But hidden beneath the ordinary facade were modifications that most mechanics didn't need: reinforced walls that could stop rifle bullets, multiple escape routes that led to cached weapons and vehicles, and communication equipment that could reach federal agencies or mercenary networks, depending on which Samantha Brooks needed to become. Samantha's real story began 12 years ago when she enlisted in the Army at age 20, driven by a combination of patriotism and a desperate need to escape a childhood marked by poverty and neglect in the foster care system of Chicago. Her test scores were exceptional, her physical fitness was superior, and her psychological evaluations indicated someone who could handle extreme stress while maintaining operational effectiveness. The foster homes of her youth had been a mixture of neglect and abuse that taught Samantha to become invisible when necessary and lethally effective when cornered. Social workers had noted her remarkable adaptability and intelligence, but they never understood that she was developing survival skills that would later make her one of the military's most effective covert operators. At 16, Samantha had been living with her 7th foster family when she discovered that her foster father was selling information about vulnerable children to predators who targeted foster care systems. Instead of reporting the abuse through official channels that had repeatedly failed her, Samantha had gathered evidence and eliminated the threat through methods that made it look like an accident. The incident had been ruled accidental death, but Samantha learned valuable lessons about planning, patience, and the satisfaction that came from protecting innocents who couldn't protect themselves. These early experiences shaped her understanding that sometimes justice required actions that existed outside legal frameworks. She had been recruited for Delta Force within 3 years of enlistment, an almost unprecedented timeline that reflected capabilities most soldiers never developed. Her specialty had been deep cover operations in hostile territories, missions where American operatives had to disappear completely into enemy populations while gathering intelligence or eliminating high-value targets. Samantha's call sign Ghost had been earned during a classified operation in Syria, where she had spent 6 months living as a refugee while tracking a terrorist financier through displaced person camps. When she finally eliminated the target, enemy forces spent weeks searching for an assassin who had vanished without leaving any trace of her presence. The operation had required her to witness horrors that would have broken most people: children starving in refugee camps, families torn apart by war, innocent civilians murdered by terrorists who viewed them as expendable. But Samantha's childhood had prepared her for environments where survival required emotional compartmentalization and tactical thinking under extreme stress. During her time undercover in the refugee camps, Samantha had been forced to watch executions, participate in propaganda videos, and maintain her cover while terrorist operatives planned attacks on civilian targets. The psychological toll of these experiences had been immense, but her ability to compartmentalize trauma while maintaining operational effectiveness had made her invaluable for missions that other operatives couldn't handle. The refugee camp operation had also taught Samantha valuable lessons about patience and long-term planning. She had spent months building relationships with people she would eventually have to betray, learning their personal histories and vulnerabilities while waiting for the perfect opportunity to complete her mission. This experience had developed her understanding of human psychology that would prove crucial in later operations. Over 7 years of active duty, Samantha had conducted 31 classified operations across 5 continents, eliminated 24 high-value targets, and gathered intelligence that prevented numerous attacks on American interests. Her service record was so classified that only a handful of people in the Pentagon knew the full scope of her accomplishments. Each mission had required her to become someone else completely. An aid worker in Somalia, a journalist in Afghanistan, a businesswoman in Eastern Europe. Samantha's ability to disappear into any identity was legendary among special operations communities, but it came at personal costs that accumulated over years of never being able to maintain genuine relationships. But Samantha's military career had ended abruptly 5 years ago, under circumstances that remained classified at the highest levels of government. Official records indicated that Lieutenant Samantha Brooks had died in a helicopter crash during a training exercise in Afghanistan. The truth was far more complicated and much more dangerous. The operation that changed everything had been designated Nightfall, a deep cover mission to eliminate a terrorist leader who was planning a major attack on American soil. Samantha had spent 6 months infiltrating the target's organization, building trust and gathering intelligence while waiting for the perfect opportunity to complete her mission. The infiltration had required her to participate in planning sessions for attacks on civilian targets, to build relationships with people she would eventually have to kill, and to maintain her cover while watching preparations for mass murder. The psychological stress of maintaining deep cover while surrounded by enemies had pushed even Samantha's considerable mental resilience to its limits. But when the moment came to eliminate the target, Samantha discovered that the terrorist leader was being protected by a high-ranking CIA officer who was selling classified information to enemy networks. The revelation that American intelligence agencies had been compromised at the highest levels put Samantha in an impossible position: complete her mission and expose the traitor or protect the institutional secrecy that kept other operations secure. The corrupt CIA officer, Deputy Director Marcus Vincent, had been selling information about American covert operations to terrorist networks for over 3 years. His betrayals had resulted in the deaths of at least 12 American operatives and the compromise of operations that could have prevented multiple terrorist attacks. Samantha had chosen to complete her mission, eliminating both the terrorist leader and the corrupt CIA officer in a single operation that saved American lives, but created enemies within her own government. The official helicopter crash had been staged to give her a new identity and extract her from a situation where powerful people wanted her dead. Vincent's death had been officially attributed to a terrorist attack, but his allies within the intelligence community understood that he had been eliminated by an American operative. These individuals had significant resources and institutional protection, making them extremely dangerous enemies for someone who had chosen to expose their corruption. For 5 years, Samantha had lived quietly in Pine Ridge, using skills learned in military operations to build a successful business that provided perfect cover for someone who needed to disappear. She fixed trucks for ranchers, repaired farm equipment for local families, and gradually became part of a community that asked few questions about someone's past. The transition from covert operative to small-town mechanic had been more difficult than Samantha had anticipated. Years of hypervigilance and combat stress had left her with psychological scars that civilian life couldn't easily heal. She suffered from nightmares, hyperarousal responses to sudden noises, and difficulty forming close relationships with people who couldn't understand her experiences. But working with her hands on mechanical problems that had clear solutions had provided therapeutic benefits that military psychiatrists had never been able to offer. The garage became a sanctuary where Samantha could use her intelligence and problem-solving skills for constructive purposes while maintaining the physical activity and technical challenges that kept her mind sharp. The tattoo that would eventually expose her was hidden on her left shoulder, covered by the long sleeves and coveralls she wore while working. It was a small, intricate design that looked like abstract geometric patterns to casual observers. but to anyone with knowledge of classified military units, the tattoo identified Samantha as a member of Delta Force's most elite operational cell. The design incorporated symbols that represented her specialized training, mission history, and unit affiliation in a code that only military intelligence officers could interpret. Samantha had gotten the tattoo during her final leave before the operation that ended her military career, never imagining that the permanent marking would eventually lead federal agents to her carefully constructed new life. The tattoo had been designed by a former Navy SEAL who specialized in creating memorial artwork for special operations personnel. Each element of the design told part of Samantha's story: mission locations, operational specialties, commendations that couldn't be publicly acknowledged. To the untrained eye, it appeared to be decorative artwork with no particular significance. The events that brought the black SUVs to Pine Ridge began 3 weeks earlier, when a new customer brought his truck to Samantha's garage. The man introduced himself as Jack Carter, a traveling salesman who needed transmission work while passing through town. He seemed ordinary enough, middle-aged, friendly, driving a well-maintained Ford pickup that suggested he took care of his equipment. But Samantha's operational instincts, honed by years of deep cover work, detected subtle inconsistencies in Carter's story that suggested he wasn't who he claimed to be. His hands were too soft for someone who worked with tools, his knowledge of trucks was superficial, and his casual questions about Samantha's background felt like intelligence gathering rather than friendly conversation. More concerning was the way Carter's eyes tracked movement around the garage, cataloging exit routes and defensive positions with the systematic attention of someone trained in tactical assessment. When he paid for the repair work with cash from a wallet that contained multiple credit cards and different names, Samantha knew she was dealing with a professional operative. Carter had also made subtle attempts to examine Samantha's workspace and personal belongings, using techniques that suggested training and intelligence gathering. His questions about her business history, customer base, and personal relationships followed patterns that Samantha recognized from her own experience conducting preliminary reconnaissance. That night, Samantha activated security protocols she hadn't used in 5 years, checking perimeter sensors and reviewing surveillance footage to confirm her suspicions. Carter had returned after hours to conduct reconnaissance of her property, using techniques that identified him as someone with advanced training in covert operations. The surveillance equipment Samantha had installed around her property was military-grade hardware, disguised as standard security cameras and motion detectors. Her analysis of Carter's behavior patterns and operational methodology suggested he was most likely a federal agent conducting preliminary investigation before a larger operation. Over the following weeks, Samantha detected increasing surveillance activity around Pine Ridge. Unknown vehicles appeared on roads that rarely saw traffic. Communications equipment registered electronic signatures that suggested government monitoring, and local residents reported strangers asking questions about the mechanic who ran the auto repair shop. The surveillance was sophisticated, but not perfect. Samantha's training allowed her to identify patterns that civilian observers would miss. Vehicles that appeared in different locations with license plates that followed federal fleet numbering systems, electronic signals that indicated the presence of monitoring equipment, and behavioral patterns among apparent tourists that suggested professional surveillance training. Samantha had prepared for this possibility since the day she arrived in Pine Ridge. Her escape plans included multiple vehicles hidden in different locations, cached weapons and supplies positioned along various routes, and contact protocols for reaching allies who could provide assistance if her cover was blown. The escape plans were comprehensive and had been tested through regular exercises that Samantha disguised as hunting trips or equipment maintenance. She had established relationships with smugglers, mercenaries, and former military personnel who could provide transportation, weapons, or safe houses in exchange for payment or future favors. But as the surveillance intensified, Samantha realized that running would only delay the inevitable confrontation. Someone with significant resources was looking for her, and eventually they would find her regardless of how well she had hidden. The only question was whether that confrontation would happen on terms she could control or in circumstances that gave her enemies every advantage. The decision was made for her on a Tuesday afternoon when Jack Carter returned to her garage, this time accompanied by 3 black SUVs that positioned themselves to block every exit from her property. The vehicles were standard federal issue, equipped with bulletproof glass and communication equipment that suggested a coordinated operation. 8 men in dark suits emerged from the SUVs, moving with the practiced efficiency of agents who had conducted similar operations many times before. They positioned themselves around the garage with tactical awareness that indicated advanced training, but their posture suggested negotiation rather than immediate violence. Samantha continued working on the engine she had been repairing, using the additional time to assess the tactical situation and consider her options. She could fight her way out. The garage contained enough weapons and defensive advantages to handle 8 agents, but that would require killing federal law enforcement officers and confirm that she was a threat to national security. Alternatively, she could attempt to negotiate, using her knowledge of classified operations to bargain for terms that allowed her to maintain her new life in exchange for cooperation with whatever mission had brought the agents to her door. The agent who approached her workbench was tall, gray-haired, and carried himself with the authority of someone accustomed to command. His credentials identified him as Agent Collins from a federal agency, whose name Samantha recognized from her operational briefings. "We know who you are, Samantha," Collins said, his voice carrying a mixture of respect and wariness. Samantha set down her wrench and slowly rolled up her left sleeve, revealing the tattoo that had remained hidden for 5 years. The geometric patterns seemed to shift in the afternoon light, their meaning clear to anyone with the proper security clearance. "Then you know I've been waiting for this conversation," Samantha replied. Collins's expression changed as he studied the tattoo, recognizing symbols that appeared in classified files he had spent years reviewing. "Lieutenant Samantha Brooks, Delta Force, officially deceased 5 years ago. Except you're very much alive and apparently working as a mechanic in Colorado. Former Lieutenant Brooks died in that helicopter crash, just like the official records indicate. Samantha Brooks the mechanic is who I am now. We need the former Lieutenant Brooks for a mission that requires her specific skills. The mechanic's quiet life is about to become complicated." Samantha looked around her garage, taking in the tools and equipment that had become part of her identity over 5 years of building a normal life. The smell of motor oil and metal shavings, the satisfaction of solving mechanical problems, the simple interactions with customers who valued her work. All of it was about to disappear. "What makes you think I'm interested in returning to a world that declared me dead?" Collins gestured toward his team, who had maintained their positions but weren't pointing weapons or making threatening moves. "Because the alternative is explaining to congressional oversight committees how a supposedly deceased special operations soldier has been living under an assumed identity while in possession of classified information that could compromise ongoing operations." The threat was delivered professionally, without malice, but Samantha understood the implications. She could cooperate voluntarily, or she could be compelled to cooperate through legal mechanisms that would destroy the life she had built in Pine Ridge. "What's the mission?" Samantha asked. Collins activated a tablet and displayed photographs that Samantha recognized from intelligence briefings conducted years earlier. "The terrorist organization you dismantled during Operation Nightfall has reconstituted under new leadership. They're planning an attack on American soil that will make 9/11 look like a minor incident." Samantha studied the photographs, recognizing faces from the organization she thought she had destroyed 5 years ago. "I eliminated their leadership structure and support network. How did they rebuild so quickly?" "They had help. The same corrupt intelligence network that you exposed has been working to rebuild terrorist capabilities while staying ahead of our investigations. We need someone who understands their operational methods and can penetrate their security. You need someone expendable who won't be missed if the mission goes wrong." Collins's expression didn't change, but Samantha saw acknowledgement in his eyes. "We need someone with your skills and operational history. Whether you're expendable depends on how well you perform." Samantha considered her options, weighing the life she had built against the mission requirements that only she could fulfill. Pine Ridge represented peace, normalcy, and the chance to use her skills for constructive purposes. But the terrorist threat represented unfinished business that would eventually find her regardless of where she tried to hide. If I accept this mission, what guarantees do I have that Samantha Brooks the mechanic can return to her quiet life? Complete the mission successfully, and your new identity becomes permanent with full federal protection. Fail, and Samantha Brooks the mechanic ceases to exist along with Lieutenant Brooks. The conversation was interrupted by one of Collins's agents, who approached with a tablet displaying real-time intelligence. "Sir, we're receiving reports of suspicious activity at 3 separate locations. The timeline may be accelerating." Collins reviewed the intelligence, his expression growing more concerned. "Lieutenant Brooks, we don't have time for extended negotiations. The attack is planned for next week, and you're the only operative who can prevent it." Samantha looked around her garage one final time, memorizing details of the life she was about to leave behind. The half-repaired truck, the tools arranged precisely where she could find them, the coffee mug with the Pine Ridge Auto Show logo, all reminders of 5 years spent building something normal. "Agent Collins, I'll take your mission. But when it's over, I want assurances that no one ever comes looking for Samantha Brooks again." "You have my word, Lieutenant. Complete this mission, and you can return to fixing trucks for the rest of your life." Samantha walked to a tool cabinet that looked identical to the others in her garage, but opened with a biometric scanner that revealed equipment she hadn't touched in 5 years. Combat gear, weapons, communication devices, and identity documents that would transform her back into the ghost operative who had once been one of America's most lethal assets. As she changed from coveralls into tactical equipment, Samantha felt the familiar weight of responsibility that came with missions where failure meant American deaths. The peaceful mechanic was disappearing, replaced by someone who understood that some problems could only be solved through violence applied with surgical precision. 20 minutes later, Samantha Brooks climbed into the lead SUV as the convoy departed Pine Ridge. The garage remained open, tools scattered across the workbench, a half-finished repair that would never be completed. To her neighbors, it would look like she had simply disappeared, leaving behind only questions about the quiet mechanic who had never talked much about her past. But Samantha knew she would return to Pine Ridge when the mission was complete. The tattoo on her shoulder was a permanent reminder of who she had been, but the life she had built as a mechanic represented who she chose to become. The question was whether she could complete one final mission without losing herself in the process. As the convoy reached the highway, Samantha began reviewing mission files that would determine whether Samantha Brooks the mechanic would ever return to the garage where she had found peace among the smell of motor oil and the satisfaction of mechanical problems that had clear solutions. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, you can subscribe to see more incredible stories like this one.